Did you know that the United States asylum system, as we know it today, was born out of tragedy? In 1939, a ship called SS St. Louis left Germany, carrying 937 Jewish refugees fleeing the Holocaust. They sailed in Cuba. Cuba turned them away. They sailed to the U.S. The U.S. turned them away too. The ship returned to Europe. More than 254 of those passengers died in the Holocaust. There was a public outrage over that rejection, turning people away with a well-funded fear of persecution, eventually led to the Refugee Act of 1980. Signed by President Jimmy Carter, established the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program and asylum system as we know it today. Now hold that history, because everything we're going to uncover today connects directly back to it. And we have a deadline in 2 days that every person with a pending asylum case needs to know about right now. And DHS dropped a brand new asylum fraud directive. And globally, the European Union is fracturing over migration with no consensus in sight. Stay with me, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. Now, I'm going to say this clearly and slowly because the deadline is 2 days away and the consequences are severe if you miss it. Beginning May 29th, DHS and uscis will implement new fees and enforcement rules for people with pending asylum applications under application I-589, the official document in the DHS Interim. Final rule published April 29, 2026. It is publicly available at federalregister.gov. Search Asylum Annual Fee 2026. Now, who does this affect? Anyone with a pending asylum application form I-589 that has not yet been decided by uscis or the immigration judge. If your case is still open, this applies to you. The applicant with pending asylum case will face a recurring annual fee of $102 for every year their case remains unresolved. New asylum application also requires a $100 filing fee for case filed on or after July 2022-2025, which was last year. If the annual fee is not paid within 30 days of notice, uscis may reject the pending asylum application, deny or revoke related work authorization, and in some cases initiate removal processing for individuals who don't have another lawful immigration status. So, your entire asylum application rejected, your work permit revoked, and removal processing began. So not because the judge found you ineligible, not because your case has no merit, because of an unpaid fee. What you could do right now is check whether you have received a notice from uscis, check your mail, check your uscis online account, check your attorney records if you have one. Step 2, if you have received a notice, you have 30 days from the notice date to pay it. Do not wait until the 29th. The deadline is when the rule takes effect. Individual notices may have already been sent out before that date. Step 3, if you cannot afford a fee, there is a fee waiver that I'm going to put in the comment section, or in the comment section and in the description, which is Form I-912, request for fee waiver. You must demonstrate financial hardship. Immigration attorneys and non-profit legal aid organizations can help you file it. You can find legal aid in your state at immigrationsadvocates.org. And step 4, if you don't have an attorney, get one this week, not next week, this week. The consequences of missing deadline can be and is permanent. uscis will reject Form I-102 filing without the proper fee if it's postmarked on or after May 29, 2026. So 2 to 3 days. It's not a drill. If you have a pending asylum case, you need to act now. Share this episode if you know someone with a pending asylum case. They need to know this information before Thursday. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. And on May 26th, which is today, DHS published a new directive on its official website. Brand new, posted this morning. DHS released a directive instructing ICE to take additional steps to track down on fraudulent asylum claims. ICE was basically instructed to develop anti-fraud policies that will further enforce and document fraud laws. The official press release, DHS takes additional steps to crack down on asylum fraud. Here's what the directive says about attorneys, and this is the part that immigration advocates are reacting to strongly. The directive states that immigration attorneys representing illegal aliens frequently coach their clients to conceal their past and even outright lie in their asylum claims. This DHS press release, an official government document characterizing the work of immigration attorneys as coaching clients to lie, not alleging fraud against specific attorneys, broadly characterizing legal representation in asylum cases as facilitating fraud. The American Immigration Lawyers Association has yet to issue any formal response of this recording, but the implications are significant. If an immigration attorney is characterized as fraud, facilitating, official government directive, the chilling effect on legal representation is real. Attorneys may become more cautious, less willing to take asylum cases, right? Which means asylum seekers already navigating the system without enough lawyers have even fewer options. So this directive landed on the same week as the asylum fee deadline. The message from DHS this week is consistent and it's deliberate. Asylum is not right to be exercised. It is a privilege to be earned, a fee under suspicious of fraud. Now, let me take you to Minnesota and then beyond that through Operation Paris, which you might not know what that stands for. It is Post-Admission Refugee Re-Verification and Integrity Strengthening. Yeah, thank God they made it to Paris because that's a whole lot. It's a mouthful. Through USCIS is conducting background checks, re-interviews, and merit reviews of refugee claims with the initial focus for about 56 refugees in Minnesota who have yet to be granted green cards. These are not undocumented people. These are people who have, who did not cross here illegally. These are legally admitted refugees who underwent extensive vetting, people who applied for refugee status outside of the U.S., who were interviewed by U.S. officials, who got cleared, who flew here in U.S. coordinated flights, who have been living legally in the U.S. for some years. A federal judge said a court will not allow federal authorities to use a new and erroneous statutory interpretation to terrorize refugees who migrated to this country under the promise that they will be welcomed and allowed to live in peace. Far from persecution, they fled. So, there's a nursing refugee mother of 5-year-old who was arrested and transferred to a state detention facility in Texas. Operation Paris created a convoluted legal situation in some interviews still going forward, while others have been cancelled at the last minute, leaving refugees in limbo. Now, here's the global dimension the U.S. media is not covering. The refugee targeted under Operation Paris come primarily from Somalia, Afghanistan, DRC, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we can, the Ebola where it's generated from right now, Myanmar, Eritrea. Every single one of those countries experiencing either active or armed conflict, military dictatorship, or documented systematic persecution of ethnic and religious minorities right now in 2026. New Humanitarian and Al Jazeera have reported on the deportation back to these countries means in practice. Somali deportees have been killed by Al-Shabaab within weeks of return. Afghan deportees have been disappeared into, you can say, Taliban detentions. Congolese deportees have been reported to be in active conflict zones where the Ebola, as I said, is spreading right now. The court order protecting Minnesota refugee remains in place, but USCIS has signaled its plans to expand Operation Paris to other states. And globally, the European Union held an emergency migration summit this week. The outcome, no consensus. Italy and Greece demanding that the other EU nations share the burden of asylum seekers arriving by sea from North Africa. Germany and Sweden pushing back on mandatory quotas. Hungary are now under the new leadership after Orban defeat is watching from the sidelines. The EU migration policy is fracturing along the same fault lines of the US migration policy, while the nations simultaneously tightening their borders, fighting over who's responsible for asylum seekers, and dismantling the legal framework that was supposed to protect the world's most vulnerable people. The language is different. The policy outcome pretty much the same. Now, remember the story that I told you about the top of the show tonight? The SS St. Louis 937 Jewish refugees turned away by Cuba, by the US, 254 died in the Holocaust. That tragedy and the public outrage generated, which is the Refugee Act of 1980, the law was signed 46 years ago. It was built specifically so what happened to those passengers of the SS St. Louis turned away because no government wanted to be responsible for them could never happen again. Today, asylum seekers face $102 annual fee that could end their case if unpaid. Legal refugees who were promised to safety are being re-vetted and detained. A new DHS directive characterizes asylum seekers as fraud coaches, and the EU, which watched the Holocaust happen on its own continent, cannot agree on who's responsible for people crossing the Mediterranean today. The Refugee Act 1980 was built on a promise. What we covered today is a direct measure of how much of that promise really remains. Share this episode right now. Everything else is going to be in the description box. I leave you in the care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.